Waking up at sunrise, tears in my eyes.
Welcome to the Making of the Female CEO, where we go beyond the Instagram-ready CEO to provide the behind-the-scenes grit that shapes and develops successful women leaders. Through candid interviews and real-life examples, we'll share the secrets of success and the lessons learned along the way. Join us on a journey of inspiration and empowerment as we showcase the untold stories of trailblazing women who have overcome challenges and obstacles to achieve their dreams, such as our guest today, Alissa Bickar, known as the Consultress. She's a seasoned real estate investor, a business coach with over 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship, finance, and coaching. She specializes in bridging the gap between advisory services and active business building, utilizing her proprietary simple method to empower clients in personal development and tactical wealth building. Alissa is also the host of the Rise and Shine with Alissa podcast series, where she shares insights and interviews with industry professionals. Alissa, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. This is super awesome. Thanks for having me.
On your journey to leadership, many female CEOs face unique challenges on their path to leadership. Can you share a pivotal moment in your career where you overcame a significant obstacle, and how did that experience shape your approach to leadership?
It started early in my career where I was in an entrepreneur family. I grew up behind the counter of my family's bagel store, serving customers, being the smiling face, and learning to people please, and learning what it's like to work a retail job for a retail wage. And then I joined financial services. I was in the wealth management division at a bank, and I had gotten my licensing to be a financial planner. And I realized that at all these levels of businesses, there were common themes about the personal experience of everybody involved. I knew from a very early time that I wanted to make a difference for the individual. And my first mentor gave me this quote that said, "Don't run to stuff." And I got to tell you, that shifted my thinking, because up until that point, I had gone in my professional career from bank to bank, from a to advisor to, I don't think this is for me. And some of the folks that are closest to me said things like, "Just don't understand. You're smart. Why do you keep resetting? Why do you keep failing? Why do you keep starting over? God, can't you just be happy working in a bank?" And the truth of the matter was, I was not happy there. It wasn't personally fulfilling. And I felt like I kept hitting these barriers to creativity that I never knew growing up in a family business. But in corporate, there is, you sit down, you shut up, and you row the boat. If you rock the boat, people are like, "Hey, we don't want to break things. We like the fact that we can." Long story short, I tried to belong in all of these places and found my cup empty. I stepped out on my own and joined a multi-level marketing business to figure out how to be a good sister in the global sisterhood of business, because all my personal experience comes from the grand pursuit of business. I figured, hey, if I can put myself in a room full of women and learn how to be a good saleswoman and build a business in a way that is out of this corporate context, maybe then. Version of Consultress 1.0 was the Passionista. My passion came alive. I was connecting in community with other women, and it just, oh God, I finally felt like, holy cow, I'm in the rooms where I'm stepping into leadership. I'm helping people understand things about themselves, about their work, about their relationships, and I feel fulfilled. And I was successful, it felt, without really even trying, and thought, if I can build this in a way that helps me to leverage all of my knowledge with my financial background, with my family business background, and help people feel this way, then that's got to be my calling. But to step into that calling, nobody understood coaching at the time in my family or in my close circles. Nobody really understood what I was about. So I got a lot more feedback that was, "Are you sure? And are you crazy? And we don't understand what it is that you do." But if I had stopped and let that limit me and put me back behind the customer service desk at a bank, I would have died slowly. And that was not something I was willing to do, but it took a lot of guts to continue to forge forward with this notion that I thought I knew something, that I just had to discover what it was. It wasn't something I had been taught, but to step into creative mode. And I would never say I would regret any of it, but going through it was not a cakewalk.
Times we hear about the outlier feeling, especially if you don't come from an entrepreneurial family in general. I hear what you're speaking of. I didn't understand what coaching was like, especially when you're on the cusp of something new at that time. I remember in the early 90s trying to explain to even my friends back then what I was doing with web page development, internet, email, things like that. That was brand new in the early 90s. And it made no sense to my parents or to anybody really around me, even my friends, because it was so new back then. I want to talk about facing failure. Can you share an instance where you faced a significant failure and how did you navigate that experience? What lessons did you take away from it?
How much time do we have? I can bring up the personal failures, the business failures. When I pivoted into real estate professionally, I was doing coaching for a while. And my husband was like, I know you're out there building your dream, Alissa, but what I really want to be a real estate investor in our own right. I really want us to do that. I personally took that on. I went full bore into figuring it out and taking it on personally because I come from a family business that was involved in it. So I was familiar, but I didn't have direct experience in it. I went and got licensed and tried to find a firm that was focused on investment. I didn't want to be a realtor. I needed to know where I could go learn more about the investment real estate, which was really difficult to find. But I did find an organization that was an investors association and a brokerage and a charity and a funding operation. And within a couple of months, they put me in the director's seat for the funding division. I had so much background in financial services. I already naturally spoke the language. I had to train up a little bit on lending and personal money loans, but I was a quick study and it felt really good for, I don't know, probably 6 months. Mind you, the backdrop of this timeline is COVID, right? So I'm ready. I walk in the door first day and they're like, "You're here for the meeting? Why? They just closed New York. What are you doing?" I was like, man, I had to learn all of this from my basement by myself behind a computer screen. One tool that I always go to that creates consistency and momentum. I invite some of these people who are brokers, who are investors, who are realtors, and we're going to mastermind together. So I started hosting in order to get over that hump. I have no access to anybody right now. BS, I'm fully committed. We do here. I started creating a weekly meetup online, which back then was clunky. Nobody knew how to use Zoom. We figured it out. And at the end of the day, that timeline, that whole year, maybe year and a half, it taught me a lot about taking the initiative and not being afraid to step into leadership positions, even though I wasn't one. It was a break from that assumption that where I had joined, I was looking for mentorship, but that I became the mentor. I was flying blind, a little bit blind. I know what I know, but I need to know what all of you know. And at the end of the day, it didn't work out. Working at that place gave me a lot of knowledge, but the relationship that brought me in wound up going sour. And again, for a lot of reasons, I'm sure there were a ton, but I started getting the feeling I wasn't bringing leads in from my own network. I didn't understand what that meant. But the culture, when I come to find out the culture of the office, that while there, I had assumed that the culture was what I was creating. But I started hearing feedback. Thank you for bringing the people together. You didn't really feel like a cohesive team until now. And I started looking at it more objectively. And I slipped my back while on vacation, visiting my deceased father's land that happened also during all this time. And I got a message that I was locked out of my email account and that I would no longer be requiring my services. I spent a full year investing of myself and pouring my coaching, everything else into that business. And I walked away with nothing. I walked away with zero and I had to innovate on the spot because I was my family's primary breadwinner. What do you do when faced with a rock and a hard place? You fashion a chisel and you just start hammering. Started calling everybody that I knew. Let me look for funding for you. I know this thing. Let me help. And I recreated from ground zero in a post-COVID world that it actually was the best iteration of my business because I brought together not only my financial prowess and my business acumen with funding and money, but then I also brought in the coaching piece and I wound up on the other side of this big failure, more whole than I had ever been at any point before that.
Okay, you got two rabbit holes that we want to dive into. One, we're going to get back to, but stress management. And you had some really great tools that I want to highlight. But first, I want to talk about something that is super relatable right now and people probably outside of our normal listeners could really benefit from. You're talking about the E to E revolution, which is employees transitioning to entrepreneurship. You're sitting there and you recognize that all of your efforts, everything you had could be out of your control. You actually gave up the control of your financial sovereignty when you work for somebody else and you saw the results of it and you dug in. Because so many people right now, they're the effect of either DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and they're federal employees and they've lost their work or they're about to lose their employment. Or there's these employees that are being replaced by AI. That's just the beginning, right? There's going to be millions that are going to fall in those places. I want to highlight what you did because this is what it takes. This is the grit that we're talking about to find yourself in a situation, dig in and go for it. Many people I'm sure are going to find it relatable. Let's focus back now on that stress management. Entrepreneurship often comes with high pressured situations. And we were having some comments before we started the show about how it does not always go the way you go, but you're a seasoned professional when you just roll with it. And you're like, all right, what do you need? How can I support you? Okay, let's do it. And then we just flow and we ran into some hiccups before the show started. Let's share about how do you manage stress during particularly challenging times? And what strategies have you developed to maintain your well-being?
All right. The number one component of stress management is making sure you have a white space for yourself. For me, that white space is like non-negotiable morning time. It is, I wake up, I fill my water bottle, and I have time to journal. I ascribe to that Morning Pages by Julia Cameron, where you dump out all your thoughts first thing during the day to kind of let out. I've used that tool quite a bit to get all of the noise that's happening between your ears, especially when you first wake up. You need to document it and then throw it away. You're not even documenting it for any reason, even if it's just lyrics for the earworm you have in your head, but having a practice of putting what's hamster wheeling around in your brains somewhere outside of your brains is a really good technique and tool. Most recently, into the water and going swimming for me, and a huge game changer because now it's a habit. They say 21 days makes a habit, and having something that I've committed to, like Pages, the first thing that I do when my feet hit the floor from my bed is drinking water. These little tiny things that don't think that this is the stuff that's really powerful, it's going to move the needle for you. Just to have space to be you, if you make that a priority, then the rest of your day, even if the stuff rolls downhill like it does and you find speed bumps and hiccups, have that place to go back to. To me, that has been a huge source of support. When I was experiencing this disruption, when I went from entrepreneur to employee and had to go back out into entrepreneurship, having a space to do that, not only having the white space in your habits, but having a physical space. Maybe that is not your bedroom, it's down the hall. Maybe it's a special room. Maybe it's your yoga mat that you roll out in the kitchen when no one's awake. At the end of the day, having a space that's dedicated in your environment, that's in that space, I know that it's me time. You're creating the environment outside of you and the environment inside of you to know that you're primary, you matter. We women have to be able to serve from a full cup because often we're busy serving everybody else. And during this frame of huge stress, I also had my husband and my 2 kids that were home with me the whole time. I had to create an office out of nowhere. I'm like, we're using the bedroom. I'm going to be in the bathroom for a little while. Having a space for yourself, white space in your calendar, and a space that you can into, and it's already set for you to dig in and take care of yourself. Humongous.
100% agree with that. And I think some people are having some deja vu and some flashbacks of all of that stuff that a lot of us, and especially entrepreneurs, really had to kind of into gear. And you let another perfect segue, balancing roles as a real estate investor, a business coach, a podcast host, and the breadwinner, major person in your family, and a mom. How do you manage these diverse roles? What strategies do you employ to maintain balance and ensure each venture receives the attention it deserves?
This is a loaded question. Having vision for your life and knowing what is non-negotiable so that you have clarity about how to make prioritization decisions is key. Because as you were saying this, I'm like, I do a lot of stuff. I have specific time where I put on the podcaster hat. I have specific time. My kids come home from school. I have a calendar block across the whole week. The hour when they first walk in the door, they're teenagers now, so maybe 5 minutes. I know they have need for me that I can be available to them. Prioritize family. And like you said, being that real estate investor, That doesn't work on anybody's timelines. Let's schedule appointments for deals that go sideways. You have to be willing to in the canoe and start paddling. So something that works. Don't schedule any of my coaching stuff before 10 a.m. That early in the business day, I have time to address whatever is percolating. And then I don't schedule myself back to back. I always make sure I have at least a 5-minute buffer between meetings so that if kids are calling in the middle of something, I'm never really more than 40 to 60 minutes away from being able to hop in and break fix as a mom. And knowing where I'm going to work and what in my calendar times I'm going to work allows me to have separation, because working from home is its own unique challenge because office becomes everybody else's house at certain times of day. Knowing how to flow with where people are, now I have 3 different workstations in my home. I know that when the dogs need attention and my husband's out doing his thing, I can work from a space where I can also be attentive to the animals. Knowing what your priorities are is very important so that you can make time and kind of out space to know that you can be flexible in those moments. When you schedule yourself from early in the morning till late in the evening and you have a rigid schedule, as a mom, and a real estate investor, that stuff doesn't fly. That it's like, okay, you made a plan, good luck keeping it. As a, who's relying on you to be there for their one-on-one calls and to facilitate meetings and to show up and be a guest on someone's podcast, things are scheduled. I needed to know, all right, I can't possibly take a speaking engagement after 4 p.m. Like, types of things aren't going to work for me. I'm aware of what my priorities are and where they tend to fall in my ideal week. It helps me to be able to make the proper game time decision to say what needs to take precedence right now.
Some more golden nuggets. Mastering break fix. We are, you're not an entrepreneur. That probably seems like such a horrible way to go about it. But for an entrepreneur, if you master that, and more like your EQ during that, right? Like building the airplane while in the air, trusting that you can fix it along the way. It's the biggest thing. Trusting that, all right, it's not all going to go as planned, but getting it out and taking action is better than perfect. And that's the whole premise of this show, right? Just get it out. And then you talked about, made a comment that reminded me of that quote that's often misattributed to John Lennon, but it was a Alan Saunders quote that said, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
That's nice. Let's talk about any advice that you'd like to give to aspiring female CEOs. What's one piece of unconventional advice you would offer to women aspiring to become CEOs? Something that's not typically discussed, but crucial for success.
Know your sisterhood. A competitive world out there, ladies. And culturally, we're conditioned to compete with one another for that top spot, whether that's with a relationship or inside of an organization. One of the things that I dove headfirst into and was blessed to learn is that when you create meaningful, genuine connections with other females in business with you, it is the web that we are designed to fall into and to use and to leverage. When you can see your fellow ladies as collaborators, not competitors, and create a community of belonging with those people, look for commonalities. Don't look for places where you compete with each other. Always go for, how do I relate to you? Or you was in that space once. Being generous with your heart and saying, want to relate to you. I think I can relate to you. Let me understand. It is better to understand than to be understood. And a lot of times in the hierarchies, it is competitive and we get lost in that, fighting for attention. Don't do that stuff. I know finance and real estate are male-dominated industries. Men operate about pecking order and the hierarchy. That'd be their jam. Dude, don't do it. Get to know your fellow sisters, understand what they're going through, and always follow your heart when it comes to giving, because you'll never regret giving of yourself, creating a space of equanimity. Sisterhood, again, is something that has helped me to rise to where I am today, because I was able to identify with, create relationships, and then they become your cheerleaders, your champions, and will stay your competitors, and that's fine. It's not about you, though. That's about their journey. Rise above that competitive nature, because collaboration is the way of the future. It's what today's age of disruption is showing us all, is that when we work together, things are better, especially as women. That sisterhood will pay you back in spades.
That was really great to talk about the sisterhood. And I love that you way towards in sisterhood when you get up to a certain point, or even if it's just one more step up, just turn around, look over your shoulder, and lend a hand back to pull up the next one. That's sisterhood. It's going beyond. We're not going to even talk about that. What we're talking about is you open the door for the next one. Wherever level you get to, you want to hurry up and get to that level so that you can help the next one up, right? What advice would you give your younger self, and at what stage and age?
A lot to choose from. That is you got some really good questions, lady. What advice would I give to my younger self? Well, I feel like today I actually am tuning in to Ultimate Alissa, coming back from the Ultimate Success range and giving me courage and encouragement that I'm on the right path, and keep visualizing her because she's calling me forward. To that point, I consistently look back at, I was in banking. I was part of the wow culture of Commerce Bank where I was doing cartwheels in the branch. I would never tell that girl to do anything other than that, but I would ask her to be a better sister because up until that point, I was very competitive and I didn't even know it. I would have loved to know sooner that women helping women was going to be the secret sauce to my success. I might have even gone back to my 4-year-old self when baby sister was born and she was a handful, and I wanted to a good big sister and tell her, if you guys disagree, it's okay if you guys fight, you love each other, and to use that as fuel to see a sisterhood in a different way. Because back then I was competing for my parents' attention. Who's this new kid? This is unscripted, so I had no idea I was going to say any of this. I would definitely go back to little 4-year-old me and be like, this is the best asset in the world right here. Learn from this relationship.
From the first thing is you pulled back from, saw a correlation of how you were with your baby sister when she arose. It might be the it person in your company or your employment. When a new person comes in, you're not competing. And you learned this early on. It's great for you. It's unscripted because that's really how the majority of life is. It is unscripted. Let's wrap up and just give you anything that you would like to share or pass on to our listeners.
I don't know. I was not born in the 70s, but I feel like I have the spirit of a hippie. One of the things that holds us back from doing new things and endeavoring to be courageous is that fear sometimes keeps us held hostage. What will happen if that girl doesn't accept me? What will happen if I compete for this space and someone, all of us, our main drivers as human species is fear. In order to metabolize that and know what's really driving you, I've developed a tool called the decision matrix that allows us to really ourselves back from the emotion of the fear and quantify using math. What is it that is really coming up for me? Why am I resisting this move? I want this thing, but I run in the other direction about it so many times. Well, this tool helps you to quantify that fear and see, is the worst case scenario. Let's get it out. Like I said about morning pages, just getting it out of your head. Let's shine the light on the thing that seems big and ugly and scary and quantify it. How much pull does it actually have on you? Make some decisions and assign some values. This 2 categories will give you your fear factor. And then on the other side of that is your opportunity quotient. What is the dream? What is the goal? Let's get some clarity around what that is. And then we'll be able to go from that opportunity and what it is that means something to us. Thank you so much for putting this up on the screen. The opportunity, let's detail it out. Let's get really into the vision here. Because like I said, with vision, all things are possible and you know how to prioritize. Well, once you have that detail around the vision, how committed to it are you? And giving yourself numerical value here so you can look at very plainly out of a score of 100, is your fear factor larger than your opportunity quotient? Or are you like, oh my God, this fear is so little. I don't know why this is stopping me. It helps you to see in black and white what is holding you back and what is the absolute worst case scenario, and assigning them numerical values takes them out of that nebulous phase and brings them right up face front with how committed to this dream and goal am I? Is it just a nice to have? Am I wishing or am I really creating a goal here? So I give this freely. If you want to send me a DM on Instagram, I'd be happy to share not only the graphic of the matrix, but kind of a worksheet. It'll share with you how to go about creating these values so that you can determine when you're feeling resistance or you're feeling stuck, what is it that's actually keeping me here? And how do I create a better tomorrow, better decisions? I can either forget this goal because it really doesn't matter to me, or I can really push the gas and get the resistance out of the way because I know that it matters. It helps you to bring yourself out of the nebulous into action. In entrepreneurship and moving our lives forward is all about taking action and being imperfect in that action, but knowing what you're committed to. So yeah, my gift to you.
Thank you for doing that and for coming on the show. One last on the spot. If you had a song or a phrase that would encapsulate you at this moment, your theme, what would it be?
All right. Well, my favorite song of all time is Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine. When I have to get pumped to do something or like I just need a dance break or whatever, walking on sunshine. Don't it feel good? Yeah. Right? Like shout it from the rooftops. Like this is me kind of song.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
for
you.
The Making of a Female CEO.
Waking up at sunrise, tears are in my eyes. Hustle every